I was at Rutherglen Academy, and we had a head history teacher whose name was Bill Jackson, who was a jazz buff, and he was a very great teacher and a very energetic teacher. And I had a brother that was 3 years older and a sister that was 7 years older. They both played jazz piano. They were both into Fats Waller and Art Tatum, and I was the youngest, and I didn't learn piano. I thought it was easier singing than it was trying to play piano. So he wrote a note home to my parents asking if he could take my brother and I to a jazz club in Glasgow to see this incredible clarinet player. And it was the Musicians' Union in Glasgow we went to. It was a Friday night, and it was Sandy Brown, who at that time was, a really big name clarinet player from Edinburgh, but he was also the head acoustical engineer for the BBC. I'd never heard live jazz, and I was totally blown away by this man. He was life-size, more larger than life, big beard, but when he played, he had this gland in his neck that used to swell out like a frog, and it was like a bit like Dizzy Gillespie's cheeks that I now know, but it was just the way he blew, and I was blown away with it by this as my brother was, and that was the first jazz I'd heard live. And we'd heard things on albums, but you couldn't get albums over here then. So that was the first, and I was at this point folk singing. I was in a folk club in the school, and I did light opera, Gilbert and Sullivan. I took the main part in that for 2 years, but I'd gotten the jazz bug. And I played with my brother. He had a modern jazz quartet, piano, vibes, bass and drums, and we used to play in the University Union. It was called the Snug Bar, where all the couples used to go, and a lot of people will remember this. No microphone, it was acoustic, and they said to me, you can't sing with us unless you sing like Ella Fitzgerald or Sarah Vaughan. And at 16, that was, I couldn't do that, so I just did the best I could. And one night, the band leader from the dance upstairs, which was a Dixieland band, came down. His name was Malky Ross, and he said, how would you like to come up and sing with our band? And I said, oh, I can't sing that stuff. And he said, everybody knows the Saints. And I said, oh, I know that. He said, well, come up and sing. I'd never used a microphone, and it was one of the ones they used to have at the BBC, the big ones with the springs round it, and it was huge. And I nearly deafened everybody in the place. It was full, because I've got quite a loud voice. And that was my first, and I thought, this is so easy compared to, trying to sing like Ella or Sarah. So I went that way. I worked for the art school jazz band, which was Jimmy Galloway, who emigrated to Canada and became a huge star in Toronto and ran the Toronto Jazz Festival. Before he went over there, I worked with his band at the art school on a Friday night. And then I joined Forey Cairns' band. This time I think I was 17, 18. And Forey Cairns' band played at this gig in Glasgow, White Craigs. And it was very, very, very busy on a Saturday night. They used to have about 600 people in there. And wherever I've gone in the world, and I've been a lot of places, there's always somebody that comes up and said, I remember you from White Craigs. And I think, so that was, right back to when I was 16. Then we started touring. The tour was all over Scotland at first, it was just, we didn't go down to England. It was all in Scotland. And we did 7 nights a week. We went to Peterhead, Brechin, Inverurie, Aberdeen, Stornoway, the Shetland Islands, Arran, Rothsay, right down to the borders, the Dumfries Drill Hall. There was 2,000 people in there on a Saturday night. And our biggest rival in Scotland was Callum Kennedy, who was the very, very famous Scottish Gaelic singer. And he used to get huge crowds, and we could be playing maybe 15 miles away from where Callum was playing. And we'd say, I hope we get a crowd in. And we used to split the crowd, you know, it really was. We got as many in as Callum did. And he'd come round and check our gig out. And we'd send somebody round to check his gig, you know. But we did this for maybe a year and a half before we went down to London. And we did 4 weeks, 7 nights a week. And then we got 2 nights off. And then we'd go down to London. Our agent down there was Harold Davison. My recording manager was Lonnie Donegan. And he used to want to do duets with me, and it was very difficult trying to sing along with Lonnie. It wasn't easy. But we did a couple of things which I must say I'm not terribly proud of, but they went out on album anyway. And we thought the agent just shut his eyes and put a pin in the map and said, right, this is the Stompers, there, 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 because we were the most travelled band in Britain at that point. George Melly, who wrote in his book that, you know, it was crazy at our gigs. We did 6 weeks without a night off, 2 nights off, drove up to Scotland, did 4 weeks without a night off, 2 nights off, and did it again. We did that for a year and a half. So we cut our teeth by doing everything the wrong way before you do it the right way. And, you know, it was incredible. We had a great, great working job there. And it was the Scottish band, we were, you know, it was very, very popular down south as well, because they used to wear tartan jackets. They didn't wear kilts, but, you know, they might as well have done. And the uniform was the Mingus tartan, which is black and white, trousers and a top. And the boys looked like they had their pajamas on, you know. But so, you know, we did that for, I think it was 2 years before half of us finally left the band. But it was, you know, it was a great scene to be in, where nowadays I don't think there's the work about to do this. You know, it's sort of shifted more to, it was always town halls, the Birmingham All-Nighter. We used to do started at 7 at night and finished at 7 in the morning. And there used to be maybe 10 bands on. They'd all do an hour or an hour and a half. But up here in those days, we did 5-hour gigs, you know, with splitting the band, no interval, splitting the band, and the bass player would go on trumpet and somebody else would take over piano, and so that we didn't have a total break, you know. So it was a good apprenticeship, which I don't think the kids get the chance of doing nowadays, except there is a definite scene emerging now, and a lot of great young piano players and young musicians coming out of Scotland, which I'm really, really proud of, because at one point we thought it was going to just die, you know. We used to play at the Cavern in Liverpool, and the Beatles were our interval group. That's with the Stompers. They used to come, and, you know, I used to say, these 4 wee boys, you know, don't they know that Beatle means beastie? You know, they've got to change their name. They were awful nice, you know. And and then we came back the next time, and there was this huge crowd outside the Cavern. And I'm saying, gosh, somebody must have put some more publicity out, because it's really, and they were all kids, and we didn't realise that they were coming here to see the interval group. But they'd actually got on, they liked what we did as well, so it was, you know. But I think the Beatles, then the Rolling Stones, that changed it all. You know, that changed it for the jazz musicians. The gigs weren't as many as we used to have, and it was, I worked down in London until 1971, and then I came back up home again. And I think by that time, the only bands that were really making any money, and, you know, it was a hard life not to make money, were Acker, Kenny, and Chris Barber. They were the 3 bands, you know. the rest of us sort of, you know, faded. We had an agent in Glasgow that was, he had a record shop, Clifford Stanton his name was, and he had a lot of contacts through the record shop. And I mean, the gigs were, the people were looking for some, it used to be Scottish country dance bands, you know, or a big band, which, you know, which maybe a 14-piece dance band. And to bring in a small group, which was obviously noisier, we were, you know, a lot more energetic than the big bands were in those days, you know. It was all da 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 da. And ours was a bit more lively, so, but I mean, the guy that was the roadie for one of the bands I was with his name was Andy Deasley, and he lived in an outer lying bit of Glasgow called Belliston, and he actually booked Louis Armstrong from a telephone box outside his house because he didn't have the phone. He phoned Joe Glazier, who was Armstrong's manager in New York, and booked him for Ibrox. And that was in I think it was 62. So he was responsible for bringing Louis Armstrong over here from America. That had never, you know, he'd been over once before. And that was, I don't know where he came to. I think it was, I didn't see him. He was in Glasgow, but I think I was too young. But so, I mean, they got the work. They got the work for us. And, but there isn't, you know, I don't think there's an agent now that's doing it for Roger Spence is the only one that he puts on the Edinburgh Festival, but I don't think there's anybody else, you know. There was a jazz scene in Glasgow and there was a jazz scene in Edinburgh, but not really any of the other towns. Aberdeen came later on. They had a very good band up there. It was run by a trombone player who worked for Grampian Television, very good trombone player, whose name has left me. But I think Glasgow and Edinburgh, there was quite a good jazz scene. There was quite a lot of bands at one time. But the rest of Scotland, no, you know. And this is evolving now. Dundee, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dumfries, Nairn, yeah, it's always said it's had quite a good jazz scene. We used to go up there many, many years ago. The guy up there, Albert Benassi, ran a lot of dances, and that he booked jazz into his dances because he was a jazz fan. But the crowd came along, they loved it, you know. In Glasgow, there were places like in London where all the musicians meet, you know, because, you know, you don't go to see any other bands because you're working. So the only place you get to meet them is after the gig. You know, there was one coffee shop that we all used to go before the gig, before the band call, and everybody used to meet up and go in their separate ways, you know. And the band call was always in, you know, in Glasgow. It was in just off Sucky Hall Street, near the old Empire Theatre. And all the bands met up there before they went to their gigs. And we knew everybody. I mean, I knew nearly all the jazz musicians in Glasgow because it wasn't a huge scene, you know. But it's different now. It is different now. The young musicians that are coming up there's just been an incredible, you know, incredible rise in the talent. And I think, I don't know whether it's the Edinburgh Festival and the Glasgow Festival that's done it, because we ran the late night jam. I ran the late night jam at the Glasgow Festival for 15 years, which was, you know, a 3-hour gig after all the concerts, and it was all the young musicians I used to get them all up to come and sit in, you know. They just got up, come on, sit in. And it was, you know, they started, a lot of them, Tom McNiven, 5 young trumpet players, Ryan Quigley, Tom McNiven, Robert Henderson, oh dear, there was 2 more. And they used to be down the front of the bandstand all of them, 5 of them, on one knee with their trumpets out, just warming, warming their instrument, waiting for me to say, do you want to come up? And then they all just used to, so and that was great because we wanted to pass it on. We wanted to pass it on. I didn't want to see this music dying. There was always a big modern scene, and the moderns and the traditionals didn't really in these days mix at all. But now it's, I think because I work with a piano player, Brian Kellogg, who is, I've worked with him since he was 17, and he's very modern and great piano player. And I think it started with just about the time this mixture started, that Dixieland players, where Ryan Quigley could play in a Dixieland band, no bother, because he used to come and sit in our band. And he was 14, 15, great trumpet player. But there's a lot of the old stuff has been lost. But this young chap, just now, Fraser Urquhart, he's got the old stuff going as well as the modern stuff, and that's great. He's got the crossover. Somebody said to me, it's very much easier for a Dixieland player or a modern jazz player, a good Dixieland piano player to sit in with a modern band than it is for a modern piano player to sit in with a Dixieland band, because it's different rules in the music, We had an interval band that got more popular than us because the kids were getting younger, and that's it. It's just really, and the kids don't get a chance to hear this music nowadays because it's not really played very much. It's not televised very much. It's not played in radio very much. They don't hear it. But when they do hear it, they love it. There's a pub in Glasgow that runs a gig on a Saturday afternoon, and it's all kids that are in, and they don't know what it is, the band are and the band are, they're nicknamed the Coffin Dodgers, because they're all very senior citizens, and but the kids love it, but they don't get a chance to hear it anywhere, which is a shame. But the young musicians have gone and listened, and a lot of them have done their homework, and that's great. We couldn't ask for anything more. Well, I did get to share the stage with Louis Armstrong, which was, no words. No words. It was ridiculous because at that time, there weren't too many non-ethnic white British people in this country. And when we got to, the first gig was in Bridlington, I think it was, and everybody we saw that had a suntan, we thought was a member of the band. We think, is that one? And we were sitting in this cafe, and Trummy Young, the trombone player, who was from Hawaii, but he was, with Armstrong for years, he passed the cafe and saw us all sitting in there and came in and said, "Is the food good?" And we, "Are you one of the band?" "Yeah, I'm Trummy Young." And this was it was like meeting Santa Claus or God even, And when we got to the gig and we did it, and I'm singing away on a huge stage and mobbed, and I looked over to the left and there was 2 guys standing, very, very black, and long coats on and big hats, and I'm looking and I'm thinking, and they didn't look very happy. And I thought, oh. So when I came off, one of them came up to me and he said, "I'm the doc. Pops wants to see you in the dressing room." And I thought, what was I, 18 or something? I thought, I've done something wrong. Well, maybe sung one of his songs, and I should, So I got taken down to this dressing room, and it was huge, long dressing room with lights all the way down, and there was this wee man sitting right in the corner with his feet in a bucket and a hanky on his head with 4 knots in the hanky, and this smile that went to there. And I went up, and he said, I'm walking the whole length of this dressing room, and he said, I just came to see who was singing up a storm. He didn't actually say storm. He used something ruder, and I thought he meant that it was terrible. And I was sort of saying, oh, I'm really sorry, should I not have? And he said, where are you from? And I said, Portincaple. And he says, where's that? I said, Scotland. And he says, oh, he says, Scotland, yes, no voices like that should come out of Scotland. And that was it. And so we spent a lot of time with them, and they were I just wanted to know about Billie Holiday. I kept asking them questions, tell me about Billie Holiday, because that's who I was right into at that moment. But no, that was fantastic. We also did the festival where, Bewley Festival, where the mods and rockers got into the festival, and I was on stage at the time, and the stage was like a merry-go-round, a big fairground thing, and I was standing at the front of the stage, and the mods and rockers were fighting with the tradies and the moderns, and somebody got up and got hold of my ankle, and I'm sort of trying to, and the drummer come off, and he's hitting this chap's hand with his stick, and they were crawling all over. So there was a riot, and they burnt half of Lord Montague's vintage cars. So that was one that was, I remember that so well. It was awful. It was being televised at the time, by the way. BBC was televising it, and they had to stop the television cameras, and oh dear. So, there's really too many to mention. Too many to mention.